Hi everyone, welcome to our panel. As you already know, our topic is Decoding Desi DNA, the science and souls of building brands for the Indic audience. Thank you for joining us. And before I begin, I actually want to thank the team behind India Digital Summit for giving us all this opportunity. I think the venue is fantastic, and so seems to be the scale of operation for this wonderful event. And I think when we got the topic, I think I'm sure all of us will agree that it's a very juicy topic because it's, designing content and communication for the Indic audience. I'm sure there's a lot for us to unpack. And I also want to thank the panelists for joining me here. Right? And when I got the names, I got really excited because, for every good panel, right, you want a mix of perspectives. Right? It can't just be four people from the same side, right? And I think we are blessed with that today because, I would like to introduce the panel as well. So we have Narin Shetty, who brings the MarTech experience. He's the Group President Revenue for Valueleaf, right? We have Puneet Kusumbia, who represents the brand side of things. He's the Vice President of Marketing at Heritage Foods. We also have Shalini Pillai Banerjee, who's also from the brand side. I'm sure we'll get a lot of interesting insights from the brand world from the two of them. Shalini heads marketing for consumer apps at Google India. And then from the editorial side in the world of content, right, we have Mr. Rajesh Kalra right there at the end, who's the executive chairman at Asianet, and Saurabh Srivastava, CEO of Shemaroo. Welcome, guys. Thanks for joining us all here. So let's get straight into it, right? I have a lot of questions, and I'm sure I don't have enough time, so let's breeze past them as well as we can. So the first section, I want to dive right into the core of a conversation, right? What is a Desi brand, right? Are there many styles of a Desi brand? Is there a singular identity? And I also want to understand what are the ways, perhaps, what are the reasons people actually gravitate more towards the Desi brand from our collective experience? So my first question is to Puneet, right? Puneet, for many years, you've been at FMCG companies, right? And I'm sure there's a lot of work that you've done to prove how Desi your company is. So can you help us understand what are the main aspects of your marketing strategy so far as to prove just how Desi your company is and why is it so important in your category?
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. So very valid topic, very strong, juicy topic like Siddhant mentioned in the beginning. See, as a FMCG player or as any player, as far as branding is concerned, the fundamentals of the branding remain the same. Whether you are trying to build a Desi brand or trying to build an international brand, the fundamentals continue to remain the same, which is you need to evaluate and see the culture. What is the culture context for that category? So if we are currently in dairy, then the dairy cultural context changes from Gujarat to Hyderabad to Tamil Nadu. Because the way you consume curd, the way you consume milk, the way you consume ghee is very different in, say, South India versus, say, in North India. So you need to know the cultural context. That's the first base line that you set. Then you scan your environment. So environment is all consisting of, the competition, the various market forces that are at play, the retail channels, the channel partners, everything happening around you. So that's the environment you need to scan and identify the proposition which best suits the, thing. Last and not the least is the emotional aspect of your branding. So once you have identified and figured this out and have a core proposition ready, you figure out the language that you want to talk to the consumer about, whether it is going to be the local Desi or you want to talk to the Gen X of your own, community. For example, even in Hyderabad, you have a Gen X, Gen Z, Gen Y, and you have a, baby boomer. So 40, 50 years of gap between the two. Each of these generations, when you talk to them or becomes your core audience, you start talking a different language. So to me, the DNA of the brand doesn't change. I think it's more about the execution of those branding principles, which makes it a Desi or an international brand. So I think that's the primary difference, I would say.
I think that's a wonderful answer. And I now want to move to Shalini, right? Shalini, you've taken brands like Google Pay to the whole country, right? Every nook and corner. Now, when you're looking at a global name like Google, right, how do you translate that great identity into relatable consumer experiences for for every Indian across the country?
I mean, the thoughts are very similar. At the end of it, when you think about a product's DNA, it's foundationally the same, but the context that you see it in is very different, right? They're in different stages of evolution. You mentioned Google Pay. Google Pay is actually quite advanced in India versus when you think about it from the other markets itself. But you take search as a product, which is very different again. But being such a large internet user base, it's got a very different context. So the first I would think about is taking the 700 million internet users, like you said, they're all consumers, but then you think about the interactions that they have with the product, right? When you think about Desi, and you brought that up, by default you think of language. And fundamentally, you would think that that's how we would differentiate. For a very long time, our product wasn't working in that language itself. And then you then put in the new context thinking that, okay, fine, you get the language internet ecosystem and it'll work for you. But that is also not true because you step back and you think 60% are actually multilingual. What is language today in India? It's a blended mix. It is not binary. So when you put those things into perspective, you start seeing how a consumer is interacting with the product, exactly like he said, curd or search. They interact very differently to the product. So you take those pieces in, you start seeing what can the product do to be helpful over here, which is one of the reasons to why we say sports is better consumed in English, news may be better consumed in Hindi. So you give them the options. So you first build for product interactions. Once you've built for product interactions, you then start looking at consumer interactions with the brand. And here's where the qualitative aspects start coming in. So for us, when we think about qualitative aspects, where he talked about Gen Z, 40% of India is Gen Z. But they're very different here versus any other global market. One of the most overarching themes, the differentiating themes that are there, is the way they're optimistic. The word that we keep hearing is Atmanirbhar by circumstance. Right? So they are very different, they evolve very differently. So you take the product context, you take the consumer context, and then you blend the two, right? Now I'm throwing the line that we use, but in Google, the marketing mission is know the user, know the magic, and connect the two. And that's how we think about doing it.
I think it's damn interesting that two companies which are very different in origin follow similar structures, but it's the way you translate them that makes all the difference, right? So I'm going to move to Rajesh. Sir, I think you've been a keen observer of Indian culture, commerce, and communities for many decades now, right? Do you think it's more important to be seen as Desi as a brand today than, let's say, in the 90s?
Namaste and good afternoon, everyone. I think both are, as Shalini would like to hear, esteemed panels have already said interesting stuff. Desi brands will have to grow in this country. The main reason for that, I think, is that there is a very strong growth in sense of nationalism which is coming in most people. They can look at the world and know that ours is among the fastest growing large economy in the world. We are the talk of the world as far as a lot of other things are concerned. There's a lot of confidence that has come into the citizens with the success stories which we can see around, including things like Chandrayaan and recognition the world over. Then there is also a lot of digital revolution happening. And we have talked about this often. Only 10% of this country speaks in English. And if digital revolution is happening, it has to happen in the languages which are other than English. And that has started happening very rapidly now. Google is here, I think one of the main focus is on how to start working in Indian languages. And I always make it a point not to call it, call it Indian and not call it, what is that other word which we often use, very disparaging word about, no, vernacular. You should never use a word vernacular for your own language. Vernacular, how can Hindi be vernacular? How can Tamil, Telugu, Marathi, anything be vernacular? There are regional languages which have a very strong literature to back it and everything. Take pride in those. And people have started doing all those things. And when you start doing these things, people also then want to see, as I said, with the growth in nationalism, about seeing brands which make them feel good about. Just look at some of the brands which have come up in the recent times. Of course, one we heard last night, of course, it hasn't started off the way it should have, but Ola guy started Kritim, which is actually a Sanskrit for artificial intelligence. Look at a brand called Akash. Akasa, you call it, but actually it comes from Akash. you look around and you realize that everybody wants to feel nostalgic. I grew up in a place called Ranchi, and I'm talking about 35 years ago. The largest jeweler there was called Javer, and the largest crockery and cutlery store in that city was called Bartan. So it's not something new. I'm talking about 35, 40 years ago. So these are the kind of things which you will expect will only grow from now on. Anything else?
Saurabh, I want to pose the same question to you as well, right? Because you have a good view into content and creators. Are there any other trends that you would like to talk about when we're talking about, why building these Desi identities is so crucial today?
Okay, so now everybody has made sensible points, so let me think what I can add to that. So I have a slightly different take on it, given the context where Shemaroo comes from or the organization where we are. I think it's not important to be seen as Desi for us, for example. It is important to be Desi, as in if that is what you are, then consumers will connect with you likewise. So brands since last 50, 60 years have very well culturally adapted to India or its nuances, and that's a wonderful manner, and that's the way you go about. But being Desi for us means that we celebrate that rootedness because that is who we are. Like a consumer at deeper level understands कि ये है भी क्या जो ये बोल रहा है types. So that is where we come from. If we come from that authenticity and credibility, consumer will also celebrate with us. If you look at Shemaroo, our tagline is India Khush Hua, and it's not in a smug manner, obviously. It's like the small joys that Indian entertainment has provided to consumers since video cassette days. So that is who are as identity. We don't need to be seen as that. We need to obviously do a good job at that. We are humble about it. Right. Yeah, so that's my take on it.
Awesome. So my next question is to Narin, because you're the last one left in my first round, right? As you know, our panel is called Decoding Desi DNA, right? And the more I talk to you, the more it comes forward that I don't think there is one particular identity of DNA, right? Like, I think we are like a billion DNAs, right? However, when you're talking about brands, it's important for you to also have a singular brand identity, which will translate to, every person differently, right? So how are you at Valueleaf, for instance, enabling that for brands? Is there certain technology that we should be aware of? Are there some other techniques that we should be aware of how are you translating a singular brand identity to so many different DNAs and so many different Indias?
Hello, good afternoon. Yeah, although having a single DNA is going to be very challenging, like a country like India, having so many vast diversities, cultures. So if you go to South India, you have 5 states. Each state has its own culture and own language, and the audience, the people, the users are very, very different. So yes, I mean, having a single DNA to any brand, that's what we suggest. It's going to be challenging, but then you have multi-channels, right? So you create campaigns, I mean, based on region-wise, based on there are creative where you can have various creatives, like short videos probably, have regional-wise, have language-wise specific for that region, which can give you that kind of result, which can give you that kind of performance as well. Having said that, I mean, the content plays a very important role here. So content and creative have a significant, feature here where it will enable to get into that Desi mode, right? So, I mean, there can be a lot of performance metrics which we can cater into, which we can have set up various set of campaigns, and you can set up on those bases. So we do talk to brands and we do suggest them to have various metrics, have various channels where you can see how it's performance, how it's giving you better results and better ROI. So that's what we do at Valueleaf, where we encourage brands to have various metrics, not have a single DNA, because it's going to be very, very difficult to judge for any set of campaigns, right? So that's what we do here.
I think you've preempted one of my questions, so we will dive later into that a lot more. Let's move on to our second section, right? In the second section, I'd love to hear from you about, nuances of Desi storytelling, right? Because I think great content comes from the intersection of, 2 worlds. Like there's the world of the user, which in our case has 1 billion DNAs and more. and then there's the world of the brand, right? And from that intersection, perhaps we can truly aspire to get meaningful communication out. But it's never as simple as this, right? This is just great theory, right? There are so many nuances, and we would love to get to the heart of those nuances. So my first question is to Saurabh, right? Saurabh, as someone who's from the entertainment industry, right? I'm sure you will have noticed, and you are also part of the ecosystem that is producing so many amazing Desi storytellers, right? We've seen a massive uptick in the number of award winners at the national stage, at the global stage. We see social media influencers, creators, I mean, it's just exploding, right? What is the reason behind this, right? And what are the key cultural trends that are shaping this new identity? What are they like, and where do they go from here?
So let me take it. So one thing we all will agree on, there is a massive democratization of how content is consumed and created more so, and largely like Shalini's organization is responsible for it. And we have been partner like on digital video ecosystem for almost 15 years since YT has been here, and you can see fascinating changes there. If you look at we were all YouTube consumer 12, 13 years back also, I assume. But if you look at the construct of content creators and the world which they come from has dramatically shifted. This is the lines between consumers and content creators are blurring, basically. Yep. So content is large amount of content, and you can see in various examples. It's better to get examples. If you look at devotion as a category, if you on YouTube, massive amount of market expansion is happening through individual creators on devotion. They are innovating, they are bringing freshness, but more so they are bringing their own experiences. Some of them are rapping and hip hopping their way to success, right? To YTV. Secondly, another example, like 5 years back, Haryanvi as a category on music, we were all not so aware of. Yes, unless you speak the dialect basically. But it has just created a sizable, significant category out there, and some of their top songs are touching 1 billion views on YT alone. They will also have views on online music ecosystem. Yes, 1 billion views only by Haryana state is impossible for a song unless they are only singing only listening to that song. It's mathematical impossibility. So obviously it's catching, it's connecting with the Desi audience also across. So I think why it works is because these creators bring their genuine life experience, their everyday struggles, their vulnerabilities. And when, as a consumer, you see, and those creators are among those consumers, when you see that content, you say, that's my life, but that's an interesting take on it. And that is where, that connection happens, and you see those successes.
Follow-up question. What do you think brands can learn from such storytellers? Because I think, like you rightly said it, they've become brands in their own right? They may be individuals, but we know of them a certain way. So what can brands learn from such creators?
Brands, first of all, have to understand they have to be where their consumers are. So if I'm an entertainment brand, for example, and that is my domain, I will not be able to create a lot of content sitting out of Mumbai, and hopefully it cracks the views. And I think Shalini will also tell us if we have a separate meeting, then don't do that. So so we have to be where consumers are, and those are our creators, basically. So that is one level of democratization we have to see. As we unlock different language markets, and that is one level of nuance. There are multiple levels of those. But suppose Shemaroo is very focused player in Gujarati market, for example. So the whole ecosystem has to come together, and when I am in that market, this is not only, I'm not adapting from Mumbai to Gujarat. I'm going and creating there, and I'm using the talent, creators, storytellers from there. So it means if you can catalyze that, then you probably have a success formula in that category, and that is how we see I gave an example of Haryanvi. You look at that, their grammar is very different from Punjabi popular music, but it captures a nuance. The amount of pride and you see them celebrating, it's because they genuinely come from there. They don't have to, it's not pretentious, it's not adaptation, it's not very clever marketing positioning that they are using. So for brands also, that is important. For example, one of our web series, What the Fafra in Gujarat, we went to 150 micro-influencers to reach out, and because they speak the same language, so we are speaking along with consumer.
Shalini would like to add to that because I think he's been referring. Okay.
I mean, he has the best seat after YouTube in trying to talk about what Indian audiences are looking at. But I think just referring back to some of the points he mentioned, right? There is diversity, but then there is universal themes that cut across. That is what is fascinating to see over here. And when you think about, and that's one of the things that we keep looking at. Content is created at such rapid pace that consumers, actually that's one of the most aspirational career jobs that everyone has. Today when we're doing these researches, they say 1 in 3 Gen Z actually wants to be an influencer. Because the voice to be heard and to be seen has become so strong, and these are the stories that are coming about. These are the stories, and if you take the collective stream of consciousness, those are the things that are coming in. So I think, you absolutely got it. It'll be shocking when sometimes you think a song like Enjoy Enjami would have actually got across. I come from the South. I rarely hear another dialect in any other conversation, but then suddenly this song is just taken over everyone's imagination. So that's the thing that we think. There is diversity. Diversity gets celebrated, but the universal themes of being seen, heard, and representation is very, very high. As long as you resonate, I think it cuts across.
I think.
Also, the availability of platforms now, the digital platforms are making it easier for all these Desi brands and the songs and all that you are referring to. This Haryanvi is actually something which somebody actually, as if somebody opened a tap. Certainly it became so big out of nowhere. There is a group called Bucky Boys or something. People keep sending me stuff from there. And the other thing is to do with most of stand-up comic used to be people who speak in English with a lot of cuss words. Now all the bigger Indian stand-up comedians, they speak in local languages, and 90% of what they use is profanities. But as I said, they seem to be more popular than the guys who just use the English cuss words.
Interesting insights. I'm going to move a little bit, right? I want to start focusing on brand purpose, right? Because in India, when it comes to brands, a lot of the conversations around Desi storytelling is built on your core brand purpose, right? And I think when you talk about brand purpose, it's very important to be seen as authentic, right? That's a given. That's a no-brainer now. So my question to Puneet, right, is what are the ways a brand can be seen as a really authentic voice in the space it chooses, right? Without it looking like, okay, they picked a cause or they picked a space for the heck of it, right? Because we are expected to deliver. So what are the ways a brand can prove its value in that conversation?
This is a very interesting space and conversation, actually, whether a brand should have a purpose or not, right? Because I think there are brands which have been there for ages and they don't talk purpose. And then there are brands who actually start with a purpose. So a lot of startups now come with mental health, menstrual health, many of those really tough areas, taboo areas, and they start with a purpose, very clear purpose, and they build their brands around it. At the same time, there are brands which have been there for ages. They are either trying to force a purpose on themselves or they are just, doing the proposition. So here is my take on actually purpose. And I'll explain to you with an example. Heritage Foods, we procure milk from 3 lakh farmers today in Hyderabad, AP Telangana, Maharashtra, Karnataka, and Tamil Nadu, right? And 3 lakh farmers is a huge number. The reason why we came into existence is because in 1992, our founder saw there was a cooperative dairy, which went bankrupt, and farmers were pouring milk on the roads. So they were distressed, and our founder said, let's do something for them. And he started procuring that milk and started to sell it. That's how Heritage came into being. Now, this purpose has driven us for the last 32 years, but we have not spoken about it. Because that's the core of our identity. Today, farmer outreach is possibly one of the best in the industry. We provide them loans, we give them animal feed, veterinary health services, medicines at their doorstep to ensure that the quality of milk that we procure and their quality of life improves. Having said that, that is our purpose which has driven us. We have not spoken about it because we feel that that's why we exist as a company, right? And slowly, steadily, in some products or other, we are starting to now build that in. We've recently introduced something called as a very good quality milk in Hyderabad, which is buffalo milk, and we are trying to build the entire theme of how farmers are helping us do that. But having said that, now this is a story of a brand with a purpose, not talking about it. And then there are brands without purpose who are trying to bring, like I don't want to name it, but they are talking about sharing the load, right? Now, for 70 years, there was no load sharing, and suddenly you start to share load on one day. Consumers won't believe that story. That is a reality, right? So we need to be mindful of purpose being authentic. If we are not authentic, then we are going to fall flat on our face. Consumers can read through very easily, actually.
These are the kind of answers a moderator really hopes for, because it's going to strike up some controversy, I hope, right? I'm guessing someone's going to get a call from Unilever, maybe. We don't know, right? But I think great points, Puneet, because, you speak of authenticity from, there's complete ownership. You're not just making a campaign out of it. This is how your company was set up. This is what you do, and that's amazing, right? I want to move to Shalini. Shalini, I think Google the world over has been known to pick these cultural spaces really well and really work hard to deliver, right? You're in the other end of the spectrum now, right? And how does Google go around picking the right planks? Does data play a role over there? And how do you see it through, right? We just want to understand, the thought process, right?
Well, the truth is I'm usually swimming or drowning in data. But I think if you have to break it down, again, there are two parts, right? Data to inform and influence, and data to evaluate. And if you take the first platform of data to inform and influence, the first thing that we're constantly looking at are metrics. At the end of it, all of us are marketers. All of us need to drive certain metrics. So you're starting to look at information that starts informing what does it mean to drive engagement? What does it mean to drive acquisition? What does it mean to drive adoption? And you're starting to look at those cohorts itself. So that's the first part. It starts to inform. Then you start going one level deeper, saying, where are we as a product going to be most helpful for them, right? To the point that he talked about purpose, which is where we link those two pieces. So there's a lot of work that we do consistently to look at this particular piece of data, or different types of data models itself. So that's the first part, which I say inform and influence. And then sometimes you just have to take a path where you want the conversation to be, right? So to the point, yes, share the load should not have started, but it started off a conversation. It started off a conversation on gender equity, and many, many brands started coming across it. Sometimes a brand may have to shed off its previous purpose to take on a new purpose, right? Yeah. So that's the other part that you look at, which comes to the next part, which is qualitative information. So the quantitative starts giving you size of price, or starts telling you how you need to look at it. And the qualitative then starts saying, how do you kind of link into those pieces? How will it resonate the best over there? And this is what I talked about in the past. We've had different planks that we've taken on search. The first plank that we did take was the fact that, if you look at the purpose, it's about organizing the world's information for everyone. For a long time, our purpose over there was the fact that gender equity was not there. Women were not interacting with the search platform. So we were speaking about that. But then as we go in and we see the kind of consumers have started moving, today's consumers have been, the kind of things that they've gone through, they've never gone through before. We're dealing with digital natives. They don't know life outside a mobile phone, right? They have been seeing things the pandemic was once in a century that had kind of happened. These things have fundamentally shifted those people. But in that, what's the truth that is there, right? And this is where we found the truth of possibilities. And then taking on that piece, does it resonate, right? So this is, you take the inform and you start looking at it, and then you come with the evaluate, right? Favorite thing that we do is A and B testing. So we keep doing a lot of testing around that piece where we actually do concept testing. So the point that you've mentioned is that it doesn't just come Many times it does come from the agency's brainwaves, and we're hoping our briefs are constantly making them think that way. But the other one is once you come back, you want to check, does it resonate, right? Do the A and B testing. So we're building those things out. All of that is at a brand level. You then go deeper into a performance level. The performance level, again, you go back to data, because data will start telling you that, hey, this consumer cohort is not really looking at understanding the different use cases of search or even payments, right? We go back and we see payments has 70 use cases. Most consumers are only using 2 of them. And so then you look at how can you build out performance storytelling and show it resonate over there. So when I look at search, I'm looking at Lens because it's got a homework problem. That will resonate with 40, 50 million people, with mothers, with children to look at that. So that's how you break it down. You start looking at where do you look at the cohorts, what does it kind of drive, and the size of price starts coming in. You start building out in terms of influence, the kind of qualitative trends that you're trying to see. And the third is, of course, start doing that testing, because if a campaign fails, your budgets are going to be under constraint. So, yeah.
I think there's a part of my next question that you perhaps covered, but I will ask you anyway. Maybe there's something else that can come forward. I think sometimes, do you think data can perhaps sometimes reaffirm the obvious, right? And does it sometimes put you in a blind spot saying, okay, okay, I'm just perhaps reaffirming the stereotype. How can data be used to signal a change? Saying, okay, we know that 90% of people are doing this, but there could be a point of evolution. Can data help you predict that? If yes, how so?
I mean, I think the point you're bringing is data bias, right? Many times we all have our biases, and then we're trying to see the confirmation bias. You look at data and it becomes a confirmation bias itself. We typically try to play the devil's advocate. You're absolutely right. You can tend to fall into it. So for a very long time, what Rajesh said about vernacular, that was our bias. Or could become the bias itself, that this is how people need to look at it and do it. So yes, you have to be careful. It is a trap that you can fall into. I think the fact, you try and think back whether you've built in those structures or you've built in those checks and balances to look at that. That's extremely important. If you build those checks and balances, people can go wrong. But the part is that, does the process allow for the checks and balances to kind of look at it? We have been thinking about it. We can still make mistakes. We're all humans. We make mistakes. But I think it's a question of making sure the process keeps improving with every mistake that we do. So,
I just want to add to that, actually. To do trend spotting, and one of the ways of doing it is to actually identify your edgy consumers. So people who are sort of on the, who are faster adopter, the early adopters. If you identify them and actually do trend spotting there, the chances of finding an inflection point is much higher, right? And whenever you do research or whenever you meet consumers, I think that is one aspect of it. But the biggest of the trend spotting happens, like Rajesh mentioned the beginning of his statement. Today we are seeing a rise of regional pride or local pride. And that's a trend which is happening due to a lot of political changes we are seeing in the country and the media which is driving it. So all those things are happening because of your observation and what you're seeing across around you. I think those are the two most important. One is keep an eye on what's happening around, but more importantly, if you can really quantitatively establish it, then go to those edgy consumers or the early adopters. They will be able to give you the inflection points faster.
I think that's a fantastic answer. Thank you for that. Question to Narin, right? How can a brand be sure that they've actually done the right thing or hit the mark with their Desi storytelling? Are the conventional metrics like likes, comments, shares, are they the only way, or are there, like perhaps I think even Shalini touched upon them to some extent, what are the other things we should be checking to know whether our message is really hit home?
I mean, while likes, shares, and comments give you that kind of boost, I mean, forget about brands. We users, whenever we post some photos or videos on Instagram or various channels, the first thing what we do is that how many likes, kitna like I have, and what is the duration, right? So it gives, a user a boost, right? Ki probably, yeah, this is what it is working for my own profile, right? When it comes to brands, yes, it gives you that kind of encouragement with kind of creatives or what kind of videos will add value. Of course, platforms like Google, and you have various platforms. If you go about and if you go deep into the funnel, you'll get that better CTRs. During that time, is my organic traffic growth? What is the growth? What happened there? Is my website traffic has increased? My app install campaigns have increased. So there are various metrics, and we keep informing brands to have a lot of metrics whenever you are creating or whenever you are start doing any kind of organic viral videos or something like that, because this will help you to make your marketing campaigns, right? You have various segments, what kind of to be done, as we told you, right? So this is, you have various diversities, I mean, various region, various cultures. So you need to be very specific what kind of creatives and what kind of content works in each state and each probably region. So this gives a lot of value. But yeah, you have to have various metrics. I mean, that can give you that kind of what would be your next plan of action, or what would be your next campaign going into it.
So that brings us to the last section. I know we don't have a lot of time, so I'm going to reduce the number of questions and just ask questions to everyone, right? I know it's not ideal, but that's what, I mean, we don't have enough time. Sure. So the question is, this section is supposed to be about the way forward from here, right? It's a look into the present and it's a look into the future, right? Because storytelling has evolved. There are lots of different techniques, technologies that one can use. It's not one way anymore, right? So now keeping that in mind, I think one of the things that we've already spoken about is regional customization, be it with the help of languages or any other techniques. What are the other technological advancements or the next step in MarTech, for instance, that we should be aware of, that when it comes to hyper-personalization of this nature? And can AI, for instance, because it's everyone's major talking point right now, does AI play a good role here, be it generative or predictive AI, either of the two? Up for anyone.
Okay, so I'm no AI expert or any of those to give you the perspective on AI, but I can tell you one thing for sure. The future of this, the Desi DNA that we are discussing today is bright. And I'll explain you the reason as well. Today we are a 3,000 USD per capita kind of a country, right? We are targeting to go to 6,000, 9,000 in the future. Now, let me just give you the context. So, entire Southeast Asia population is around 900 million, which includes around 10 countries, 15 countries. And each market is 9 crore, 10 crore, 5 crore, 6 crore population. Each of them have different content creators, different advertising, different brands, different propositions, different agencies. Now, if I think about it, I can tell you for sure, India is not a country, it's a continent. We are 1.4 billion people. Tamil Nadu is bigger than a Philippines. UP is equal to an Indonesia, right? So our market is going to go in that direction where marketing spends will chase consumers more specifically. And I can tell you for sure the Desi DNA, the Desi brands will start to become even more stronger because of local content and local insights, which will start to play up more and more. So it's a fusion of market, MarTech, AI, everything including put together. I was just discussing with Siddhant before that nowadays, for example, you have technologies which can lip sync the language. So if I create a TV scene in Telugu, I can actually lip sync it in Tamil and it'll look like they're talking Tamil. So some of these technology will be very useful in the future. But the Desi DNA is here to stay, and I think, and how I would think of that.
I'll just pick on a couple of your themes, right? I think the first one, AI has to be responsible. So there has to be responsibility. But I think you talked about it more specifically from the marketing angle and the storytelling angle. And one of the things that when we think about it is that personalization, right? Personalization is an interesting trend of how people want to be seen. We've all kind of talked about from a content point of view, but that's the other piece that we've looked at. One of the things that we struggle, like he said, is that the number of pieces of content that need to be created for each format, it's crazy. The amount of time and grunt work that gets put into the manual elements of that is extremely high. And this is where I think AI will start becoming extremely helpful. Insight will always be driven by humans. It's fundamentally, that's how we see, foundationally, that's how we see it. Unless that insight comes from here, it doesn't work, right? But all the other elements of making into 2 by 2, 3 by 2, into all these various other elements, that there's this one point of time when we looked at one piece of creative actually having 3,000 different renditions. Imagine the manual work that can happen on that, right? So I think this is where it is. The volume, the velocity, and the variation that can help on personalization is where AI will start helping in.
And this is to Rajesh and Saurabh. Do you predict any seismic shift in what it means to be a Desi brand going forward? Because like we spoke about multiple identities, we have different origin stories for the brands in our panel as well already. But going forward, let's say in the next decade or so, is there any seismic shift that's about to happen?
I think most of it would have already been answered in the discussions which you have had so far. As I said, if the growth has to happen, it has to happen in anything which is Desi. And almost everything that you look at right now shows that things are moving in that direction. And I'm just not just referring to data, because data, I remember in times, there were days when people will come to me and tell us that this is the data. What do you want it to convey? And then they will make a marketing plan based on that. So, we know all these things happen. I still remember N. Vittal, when he was the Telecom Commission chairman, he said at that time India had among the lowest telecom penetrations in the world. But he says, my guys come and tell me, sir, on this aspect, we can prove that we are among the highest in the world. Data you can choose to, demonstrate whatever you want to. But you cannot miss the point that anything to do with Desi is definitely, it's skyrocketing right now. And we can see it in each and every aspect of what we do. As I think you mentioned about the fact that it could be political, it could be the way the media covers things right now, but there is definitely a sense of satisfaction and achievement in doing and playing up things which help you feel more nationalist than it was ever happening in the past. So I see it growing very rapidly from now on. I am not from any party or anything, but I saw what happened after Ayodhya. And I travel a lot in the south, and I can tell you the kind of impact that just one event has had is something which I did not expect. So I actually think a lot of things will happen, which will, as you said, will there be a seismic shift? Yes, there will be.
2 points. I think one point I totally agree with Shalini upon, that it's not about only capturing like from one region of India or one cohort of India what they are in terms of their cultural context. If you make something, if they are coming and creating with you something authentic, it will connect with a wider audience people. So there is a wider implication of when you are being authentic to any cultural context. And second thing is, obviously, like our definitions are what Desiness derives itself from kind of rootedness we have in our cultural context and whom we are. That is changing, yes. Definition of families are changing. Definitions of communities are changing. We are becoming more globalized, yet more taking more pride in where we come from. So that is evolving like everything else in the society. So hence the Desiness or the Desi brands will also evolve. Content will also evolve likewise.
Last line. India is the growth engine of the world, so Desi will become Videshi.
That's a tagline for the panel. Thank you very much. And I think our time is up, so I'm just going to hand it over to the audience. First of all, thank you guys. I mean, these were amazing insights. I loved having you all over for our conversation. Any questions from the audience, please feel free to ask. We're right here. Someone right there.
Thank you. That was a great session. We thoroughly enjoyed. Quick question. When we're looking at performance and reaching out to rural, what's the metrics? And because are we expecting them to fill in forms in the rural? What is that we should look at?
Anyone?
I mean, it's not, see, every region will have their own, see, you have the traditional way of landing pages where you have fill the form and it works like that, right? So what we encourage brands, and there are brands who have adopted, the landing pages cannot be the predominant traditional landing pages. It can have a user flow where you have region content, where you have shots, something like a video or demo kind of thing, where you have those kind of users where they fill up their numbers or email ID, right? So the brands are adapting. It is, I mean, if you see the CR conversion as well, it improves if you have not gone to that traditional way. So there are various methods where you can probably adapt to have that kind of conversion or lead model for that basis.
Just to add to what he already said, we are basically trying to identify platforms which are rural centric. So the content there, if I can give you an example of TikTok, for example, TikTok content was very, in that sense, localized and regional or very raw in that sense, right? And that's what audiences like. So once you have the content, then there are platforms which can fulfill you your need to reach out to those audience, and you will get all the metrics that you like, actually. That's not a problem. Metrics is not a problem. I think you can add maybe more on that.
I think, the whole thing is defining the metric that matters to you, right? It's not about form filling, because form filling basically means then you'll be asking for information. So then if it's the information, if collecting information from rural audience is the most critical thing, then how do you become assisted in that? Maybe the best way is to do it form, but maybe the input to the form could be different. As we think about metrics that we look across, because we're cutting across, 2/3 of the new users that are coming onto payments are coming from these smaller markets and from rural, right? So for us over here is that, have they been able to finish filling up, which is the KYC element? Are we assisted across those places? Are we able to answer those questions? So the metrics are not a problem. I think it's a question of just saying that, okay, fine, this will be the funnel that we will see for this kind of an audience versus this. So you're clear about how you can differentiate. And then, of course, you divide the flow according to the audience itself. Did I answer your question? Yeah.
Do we have time for one more question? Anyone in the audience?
Hi, my name is Sachin Deshpande. My question is to the audience is that we are looking for our brands going global, right? So what are your tech is that, what are the things currently missing, which is, like I'll give you example like McDonald's, right? They came to India and it become a big brand. Similarly, like our brands growing internationally and it is being recognized. So what are the things which will make that happen?
So I had that one of those experiences actually when we wanted to, this was when I was working with Godrej Consumer Products. And that time we tried to do the hair color that we had here in India. We wanted to take it to Indonesia. And one of the easiest thing for us would have been to do basically launch the same name here as over there. But what we realized is the context of the market was different. The culture context was very different. It was a 90% Muslim population. Hair color had cultural or even religious connotations of not using it. So we had to go very different route there. And therefore when we did it, we created a new brand over there. We launched a new brand completely. Now, this is an example of an Indian MNC going there, doing things in the way that consumers actually like it. So that's where I think I'm coming back to that original point that I started in the beginning. It's all about understanding the cultural context, environment, and your competition very well. Once you know that, then whether to take McDonald's globally or to create a local McDonald's will become an easy answer, actually. And a lot of Indian companies are doing that when we go globally.
If you have that answer, then I would like to know. Because if you look at content, like nothing has traveled like Korean and Turkish content when it comes to non-English content. And I think it comes from the same thing, as in, can you find a hook? And at the same time being very authentic and powerful. So it will make it travel. We travel largely to diaspora. And because we are, and it's not about Shemaroo, it's about larger content ecosystem, basically.
All right, thank you. That's time for us.